Everything you thought you knew about humanity's closest living relative? A convenient lie. 2024 research just shattered 50 years of scientific mythology. Bonobos aren't peaceful hippie apes living in some rainforest utopia. They're not the gentle alternative to violent chimpanzees. That story? Fabricated, oversimplified, dangerously incomplete. What's emerging from the Congo basin is far more complex, more disturbing, an ape species that shares 98.7% of our DNA. Closer to us than gorillas, closer than orangutans. So close that if you sequenced a bonobo genome and a human genome side by side, you'd struggle to spot the differences. We called them the make love not war apes. We used them to argue that human violence wasn't inevitable, that peace was our birthright. Turns out we were projecting our fantasies onto another species entirely. And the new evidence? We weren't slightly mistaken. We were catastrophically wrong about their aggression, their society, even their famous sexuality. Bonobos might be far more violent and monumentally more strategic than anyone imagined. Let's rewrite everything. I'm taking you into the flooded forests of the Democratic Republic of Congo. We're uncovering the real bonobo and exposing exactly how scientists got it so spectacularly wrong for so long. Picture an ape that looks almost human, standing upright more naturally than any other great ape. Pink lips against black faces, hair parted down the middle like a teenager from the 1970s, weighing between 25 and 60 kilograms, living in communities of up to 150 individuals. They weren't even recognized as a separate species until 1929. For decades, scientists assumed they were just small chimpanzees, a regional variant, nothing special. Then German anatomist Ernst Schwarz examined a skull in a Belgian colonial museum. Something was wrong. The proportions didn't match. The teeth were different. The cranial capacity suggested something else entirely. Schwarz had discovered Paniscus, the bonobo, humanity's other closest relative. But here's where the mythology began. The first serious field studies didn't happen until the 1970s. By then, researchers arrived with assumptions already locked in. They saw what they expected to see. They documented what confirmed their hypotheses. Japanese primatologist Takayoshi Kano spent years at Wamba in the Democratic Republic of Congo. He observed bonobos resolving tension through sexual contact, males mounting males, females rubbing genitals together, copulation happening constantly, casually, sometimes for just a few seconds. The scientific community went wild. Here was proof that another path existed, that evolution hadn't hardwired violence into the primate brain, that sex could replace aggression entirely. Except Kano was watching a feeding station, an artificial environment where researchers dumped sugarcane to attract bonobos for easier observation. High-calorie food bonanzas that never occur in nature. Situations guaranteed to produce abnormal behavior. It's like studying human nature exclusively at an all-you-can-eat buffet in Las Vegas. You'd reach some interesting conclusions, none of them accurate. Mythology deepened through the 1980s and 1990s. Frans de Waal, perhaps the most influential primatologist alive, championed bonobos as the peaceful alternative to chimpanzees. His books reached millions. TED Talks spread the message further. Bonobos became symbols. Feminist scholars embraced them. Here was a matriarchal society where females dominated through coalition building rather than physical force. Where sex wasn't about reproduction, but social bonding. Where infanticide, common in chimps, seemed absent entirely. The narrative was irresistible. Chimps represented our dark side, bonobos our better angels. We could choose which ancestor to emulate. One problem: the research was pathetically thin. By 2000, total observation hours of wild bonobos numbered in the hundreds. Chimpanzees had been studied for thousands of hours across multiple sites. Jane Goodall alone spent more time with chimps than all bonobo researchers combined had spent with bonobos. We built an entire mythology on almost no data. The Democratic Republic of Congo, the only place bonobos exist, has been plagued by civil war, political instability, and violence for decades. Researchers couldn't maintain long-term study sites. Bonobos lived in remote, flooded forests that were logistically nightmarish to access. Unlike chimps, they hadn't been habituated to human presence at multiple locations. So scientists extrapolated, they theorized, they filled gaps with assumptions that conveniently matched what they wanted to believe. Then the long-term data started arriving. And it was ugly. Martin Surbeck and his team at the Kokolopori Bonobo Reserve began accumulating thousands of observation hours. Same with researchers at Louis Kotale and other sites. What they found contradicted almost everything. Male bonobos are aggressive, frequently. Between 2017 and 2023, researchers documented rates of aggression that exceeded chimpanzee populations. Not slightly, dramatically. Male bonobos at Kokolopori engaged in aggressive interactions at nearly 3 times the rate of males at some chimpanzee sites. 3 times. Let that sink in. The peaceful apes were more violent than their supposedly warlike cousins. The aggression wasn't random either. It was strategic, targeted. Males attacked other males who posed reproductive threats. They formed coalitions. They remembered slights and retaliated later. They engaged in what can only be described as political violence. If you're the kind of person who finds humanity's shadow reflected in our closest relatives genuinely fascinating, hit subscribe and turn on notifications right now. Because what's coming next will fundamentally change how you see yourself. And the bonobo revelations only get more disturbing from here. Here's what nobody told you about bonobo sexuality. Yes, they have frequent sexual contact, but its function isn't what we assumed. The make love not war narrative suggested bonobos use sex to diffuse tension. Aggression would build, then sexual contact would release it harmlessly, a biological pressure valve. The data shows something different. Sexual contact often occurs after aggression, not instead of it. Males attack, establish dominance, then engage sexually with subordinates. The sex isn't preventing violence, it's consolidating the victory. Female-female genital rubbing often happens in competitive contexts, food-sharing situations, when establishing hierarchy. It's less about peace and more about power negotiation, less free love, more strategic alliance building. Even the famous absence of infanticide has been challenged. Researchers have documented suspicious infant deaths, mothers who disappeared with babies and returned without them, wounds on infants consistent with attack. The evidence is circumstantial but accumulating. And here's what really complicates the picture. Bonobo society isn't matriarchal in the way pop science describes. Yes, females hold significant power, but they achieve it through specific mechanisms that aren't particularly peaceful. High-ranking females dominate through coalitions. When a male threatens a female, other females mob him. Collectively, aggressively, they bite, they chase, they inflict genuine damage. A 2016 study documented a male losing a finger and part of his testicles to female coalition attacks. This isn't gentle feminine energy overcoming masculine aggression. This is organized violence deployed strategically by one group against another. The females simply do it better. Old females hold the most power. They've accumulated allies over decades. They remember every relationship, every favor, every slight. Young females entering a community from outside start at the bottom. They must build connections carefully, groom the right individuals, offer sexual contact to potential allies. It takes years to accumulate real influence. The whole system looks less like a hippie commune and more like a ruthless political machine with sex as currency. So why do we get it so wrong for so long? Partly observation bias. Researchers saw sex because sex is visible and frequent. They missed aggression because it's often subtle, quick, and hard to interpret. A bite can happen in seconds. Displacement, a dominant individual simply walking toward a subordinate who moves away, happens thousands of times but rarely gets recorded as aggression. Partly confirmation bias. Scientists arrived wanting to find a peaceful ape. They found evidence that confirmed it. They downplayed or reinterpreted evidence that contradicted it. Classic motivated reasoning on a disciplinary scale. Partly political usefulness. The bonobo myth served agendas. If bonobos proved that violence wasn't inevitable, then human violence became a choice rather than nature. Wars could theoretically be prevented. Patriarchy wasn't hardwired. Everything was malleable, convenient, comforting, wrong. Here's what makes bonobos genuinely remarkable. And it has nothing to do with being peaceful. They live in the only place on Earth where great apes exist without gorillas. When bonobos and chimpanzees diverged roughly 2 million years ago, a newly formed Congo River separated them. Chimps to the north, bonobos to the south. North of the river, chimps competed with gorillas for food. They evolved to exploit ecological niches gorillas didn't occupy. They became more carnivorous, more territorial, more willing to kill. South of the river, bonobos had no gorilla competition. They could eat whatever they wanted. Fruit, leaves, herbs, aquatic plants. Their world was less contested, not peaceful, competitive in different ways. This ecological release shaped everything. Bonobo communities could overlap more. They didn't need to defend territories as aggressively because resources weren't as limited. When different groups met, they sometimes interacted instead of fighting. But sometimes interacted became never fight in the mythology. Occasional peaceful intergroup encounters became evidence of fundamental pacifism. The exception became the rule. In reality, intergroup encounters can be tense. Aggressive displays happen. Chases occur. And we still don't know how often serious violence happens because we've barely witnessed these encounters. The flooded forest makes following bonobos across group boundaries almost impossible. We're still guessing, still projecting. What does this mean for understanding ourselves? Here's the uncomfortable truth. We share almost identical DNA with both chimps and bonobos. We didn't evolve from one or the other. We share a common ancestor with both. We inherited tendencies from that ancestor that express differently in different contexts. The bonobo myth suggested we could choose peace if we just tried hard enough. That violence was a chimp thing, not a human thing. That our capacity for war was a bug, not a feature. The reality is darker and somehow more hopeful. Bonobos are aggressive and strategic. Chimps are aggressive and strategic. Humans are aggressive and strategic. But all three species also show cooperation, alliance building, conflict resolution, and even occasional genuine altruism. Violence isn't our destiny, neither is peace. We exist on a spectrum. Context matters. Resources matter. Social structures matter. History matters. The new bonobo research doesn't prove humans are doomed to violence. It proves that the question was always more complicated than we wanted to admit. We're neither fallen angels nor risen apes. We're something messier, more interesting. And we're still not finished being wrong. Current estimates put the wild bonobo population somewhere between 15,000 and 20,000 individuals. Maybe? Nobody actually knows. The surveys are incomplete. The forests are inaccessible. The political situation makes consistent research nearly impossible. They could go extinct before we truly understand them, before we've corrected all the myths, before we've documented their actual behavior in sufficient detail to know what's normal and what's anomalous. The Democratic Republic of Congo has experienced decades of conflict that killed millions of humans. Bonobos got caught in the crossfire, hunted for bushmeat, habitats destroyed, orphans sold as pets. The apes we mythologize as peaceful are being killed by the species that invented war. There's a bitter irony there. We projected our hopes onto bonobos. We made them symbols of what we wished we could be. Meanwhile, our actual behavior, the violence, the destruction, the inability to protect even our closest relatives, revealed what we actually are. So, there we have it. Our journey into humanity's closest relative ends not with comfortable answers, but harder questions. Something we wanted to be gentle turns out to be complex, aggressive, political, strategic, familiar. Megalodon never existed the way we imagined. Neither did bonobos. The ocean's greatest predator was bigger and stranger than we thought. The forest's peaceful ape was more violent and cunning than we wished. Maybe that's the real lesson. We project our desires onto nature constantly. We find what we're looking for because we've already decided what we want to find. Then reality intrudes. Slowly, inconveniently. The data accumulates until the mythology collapses. Bonobos aren't the answer to human violence. They aren't proof that peace is possible or that war is inevitable. They're primates, complex, contradictory, doing what evolution shaped them to do in environments that are disappearing. 98.7% of our DNA, closer than brothers, and we still barely know them. We were completely wrong about bonobos. But here's what's genuinely terrifying. We're probably still wrong about most of it. The real bonobo, whatever that means, remains hidden in the flooded forests of the Congo, waiting for someone to look clearly enough to finally see it. Until then, complicated, political, surprisingly violent ape it is.